Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very, very grateful that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We have 3 great guests for you today. A little bit later on, Brandon Perlow and Joelle Sellner will be here to celebrate Werewolves, a great graphic novel comic. But first, we'll be speaking to K.M. Waldvogel about her book, Spies, Soldiers, Couriers, and Saboteurs, Women of the American Revolution. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to invite you to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. You can also find our Reading With Your Kids page on Pinterest. And of course, we would love it if you would go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, sign up for our free newsletter, and be sure to use the contact button on that page to let us know what you love about the show. Let us know what we could do better. Let us know who you would like to hear on the show. And always, we are so grateful anytime you share information about the show with your family, friends, and other social media followers. Joining us right now from the beautiful Phoenix, Arizona area, our guest today is here to celebrate, I think, a really important book. It's called Spies, Soldiers, Couriers, and Saboteurs, Women of the American Revolution. Please welcome to the show, K.M. Waldvogel. Hey, Kathleen, how are you?
I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful day, so can't get much better than that.
This is wonderful. Tell us about Spies, Soldiers, Couriers, and Saboteurs.
Well, this is a middle grade book. It's narrative nonfiction, and every chapter is devoted to a different woman who did something to help the Patriots defeat the British. So some of them acted as spies. Others actually fought on the battlefield. Some acted as couriers, taking messages back and forth to the generals.
Now, I've been very much aware that women have always contributed to every moment in history. I wasn't aware that women fought as soldiers during the Revolution.
And they did. Most of the time they had to hide their identity. And so, for example, one of the women that I have featured is Deborah Sampson. And she felt very strongly that she could make a contribution fighting on the battlefield, and she tried to join the Continental Army and did not have success. So she then traveled to a nearby town and disguised herself and listed under the name of Robert Shurtleff. And she was able to hide her identity for a year and a half.
Now, I know it was a different time, but it doesn't make any sense to me at all. You have a person who has fought bravely and honorably and has contributed. And at that time, I mean, the Continental Army was little more than, this ragtag unit of people who needed all the help they could get. And then they discovered that, this person who's been such a great part of our troop is the wrong gender. So out. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, she fought courageously. She fought alongside the men. They didn't know that she was a woman. I just felt that her story and the story of other women who risked their lives and did everything that they could should come to light. And so that was one of my goals, is that I could bring their stories to light. And I started out just by researching Deborah Sampson. And then I discovered other women, and I discovered their stories. And I thought, no, what I want to do is let students know that history is made up of people and their stories. And so I tried to bring out the character of each of the women in my book.
Yeah. So how did you first discover Deborah?
I was teaching 5th grade, and I was teaching social studies. And so we were reading from the textbook, and there was this little paragraph that was no more than maybe 2 sentences. And all it said was, and a woman by the name of Deborah Sampson also fought in the American Revolution. She was wounded. And that was it. And I thought, well, there has to be more to her story. And so I researched her a little bit, and then I discovered more and more women and thought, no, I want to bring their stories to light.
This is, I think it's really important for all of us to understand that, men and women have been working alongside each other forever. We think of this as that we're living in, and we are living in kind of a revolutionary time right now. But these ideas, that everybody has a role, everybody has a place, they've been with us forever.
It was kind of interesting when I was doing the research to find several women who acted as spies were able to do that because the British officers, well, all men, but especially the British officers in this case, felt that women did not have the mind that they could understand the strategies of war. So they spoke very openly about what their plans were in front of the women. And because of that, important information then was transferred to General Washington and Nathaniel Greene and the different leaders of the American Revolution.
So funny that their ignorance and prejudice did them in.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I love the word saboteur. Who is your favorite saboteur?
Probably Martha Bratton, because she was entrusted by her husband with gunpowder, and he had hidden it in a hollow tree. And he said, whatever you do, you can't let it fall into the hands of the British because they're going to use it against us, and he then went to fight with the Continental Army. And she got wind that one of the Tory neighbors had found out about the gunpowder, and so the British were coming to retrieve it. And she knew that she couldn't let that happen. She couldn't let it fall into their hands. So she actually blew up the gunpowder. She blew up the tree just as the British were getting there. And the British officer was just outraged, so he called everybody into town, and he said, whoever did this is going to be punished. And she stepped forward, and she said, I'm the one who did it. And he didn't believe her because she's a woman. And, there's no way she could do that. And she said, it was me, and it was me alone. I'm the only one, don't punish my neighbors because of this. I'm the one who did it. And I just felt that she's very brave in doing that. But then as the battles continued, it got to her property, and she helped the wounded, no matter if they were British or if they were the Patriots. She tended all of them. So I have a great deal of admiration for her.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you shared with us earlier that you were a 5th grade history teacher?
Well, I taught 5th grade all of the subjects for 4 years, but then I taught 8th grade language arts for 10 years.
All right. What's the best way to bring history alive? I have a niece right now who is just a whiz and is number one. She's number 1 or 2 in her high school class forever. It's her senior year. She's taking American history, and wow, it's not happening for her. How can we best make history come alive for those kids who aren't in love with the memorizing dates and names of places?
I think that if we make it more personal, and that's what I tried to do in my book, is to bring out that these were people who did these different acts. And you want to learn about the people and the motivation that they had. I think that makes much more sense to students, to children than to just memorize the dates on it. But if you have their actual stories as to what prompted them to fight or why they wanted to give the information to the generals, and why they would step out of the safety of their homes to do this, I think that's much more meaningful to people.
Yeah, it really is looking for the story within the story. Well, this has really been a lot of fun, and I think Spies, Soldiers, Couriers, and Saboteurs, Women of the American Revolution would be a really fun book for families to co-read together. What kind of conversations do you think families could have?
Well, I think that they can draw parallels to things right now, but I also think that they can expand on this and say, you know what, Paul Revere went across the country and warned that the British were coming. Look what Sybil Ludington did. She actually was only 16 years old at the time, and, she went across the countryside, rode farther than Paul Revere did. Why don't we, if you're homeschooling or if you're interested in this, let's trace or let's find out what the route was for Paul Revere. Let's find out what the route was for Sybil Ludington, and let's compare the two things. But also then bringing up things like, at your age, would you volunteer to do something like this? And ask the kids things like that. Can you imagine how brave they had to have been in order to do this?
Yeah. You know what else I think would be a fun conversation to have? You brought up Paul Revere and Sybil. Just to sit down and talk to kids, because I think Paul, if I remember my history correctly, he got caught pretty early, and William Dawes rode further and Sybil rode further. And, we hear about Paul Revere because his name kind of rhymed better in the poem.
Yes.
I think that would just be a great way to say, okay, yeah, that happened, but Paul Revere's like this hero and this guy that we think of the ride, and he really didn't do anything. All he did, and it would be a great way to have conversations with our kids about looking beyond the headlines to really kind of find out what's the story behind the story.
No, I agree. And the women that I featured in the book, they were not necessarily prominent women in the communities, but instead they were just ordinary women that felt a need to do something to help the Patriots. And to me, that makes them so heroic. But it also created a little bit of an obstacle for me because there wasn't a lot written about these particular women. So I had to kind of dig pretty deep to find the research and find out what they were really like.
Well, I'm really happy that you did that, and I'm really happy that we have a chance to check out Spies, Soldiers, Couriers, and Saboteurs, Women of the American Revolution by K.M. Waldvogel. Before we go, Kathleen, where can we go to find out more about the book and more about you? Well,
I do have a website, and it's simply, kmwaldvogel.com, so you can certainly find out about me. The book is available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and in Boston, it's actually at the Paul Revere House. So, you certainly have access to it there, but any of the bookstores can certainly order the book if they don't have it in stock.
Wonderful. We've had a great time speaking with our guest, K.M. Waldvogel. Hey, Kathleen, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, you may be frustrated at just how difficult it is to let the world know about your book, especially in these continuing trying times. Well, we have some solutions for you. The Reading with Your Kids podcast is here to help you let the world know about your fantastic book. You can be a guest on the podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it gives you the chance to tell the world about your book in a long-form conversation. You can also submit your book to our Certified Great Read program. If our panel believes that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read, and with that status comes a number of really powerful tools to let the world know that your book is worthy of their consideration. And we have a fantastic monthly promotion program that will celebrate your book with commercials on the podcast, shout-outs to our 70,000-plus social media followers, and have visibility on our network of digital pedestrian billboards in Boston, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Sacramento, Albany, New York, and Toledo, Ohio. You can learn all about that by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the author's Click Here button at the top of the page and scroll on down to our various services. Join us right now from Los Angeles and the great state of California. Our guests today are here to celebrate a really fun comic graphic novel. It's called WereWoofs. Please welcome to the show the publisher, Brandon Perlow, and the author, Joelle Sellner. Hey, Joelle, Brandon, how are you guys?
Good, how are you? Quite well.
I'm doing really well. Joelle, tell us about WereWoofs.
WereWoofs, Brandon and Paul, who's also working with Brandon at New Paradigm, brought me the concept of basically kids who turn into dogs instead of wolves. And we developed the idea together, and we thought it could be a really fun story involving elements of mystery and also teen issues and family issues.
Now, being a teen is hard, and kind of finding a way to fit in is really hard, and it's something that's probably a universal experience for a lot of kids. But I'm imagining it's especially hard when you're a member of a family of people that turn into dogs.
Our protagonist, Mara, has been living with this for her whole life, whereas wolves, they have to live in secret because they've had a history of persecution. So it's something that a family secret that she carries with her, and she doesn't want anyone at school to know.
Brandon, where did this idea for the project come from?
Came out probably about 10 years ago, actually. I was just coming up with some ideas of were dogs, and I like the idea of like an underdog story. I just came up with some illustrations of, half dogs, half people, characters just like, you have werewolves who are hybrids. And I was just, coming up with sketches just for fun and like, how would this become a story? It's always been on the back burner for us for quite a few years. And eventually we're like, we got to do werewolves. And after a couple of permutations, we were like, all right, we got an idea going well. Let's actually get a real writer on this. And we knew Joelle for quite a few years. We always wanted to work with her. And this was like the perfect project that we could work together on.
And we have a really fun audience of parents and grandparents and lots of authors on the show and creatives. And I think one of the things that I like to just remind folks is that just because you come up with all sorts of great ideas doesn't mean that you can always bring them to life. We oftentimes need to collaborate with others.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Brandon, one of the things that I was really surprised with when I first started the Reading with Your Kids podcast way back in 2017, and I had a publisher on at that time, Christopher Robbins of Familius Publishing, and I was really surprised to find out that a 32-page children's picture book can take 2.5, 3 years to come to life from the time that the manuscript is bought until it's released on the shelves. Now, that's a book with, maybe 30 illustrations, 600 words. Werewolf, lots more illustrations, 160 pages, probably a couple of hundred illustrations. How long does it take from the time? I know this has been an idea that's been percolating for 10 years or so, but how long from the time that you actually went to Val and Joelle and said, here we go, this is your project, go with it, till the comic was available? How long did that take?
I would say minimum 2.5 years, because it was about a good 6 months that I approached Joelle, and Joelle wrote a new summary outline for the story, and bringing on Steens as our editor and getting the script done. And even then, the script wasn't fully finished. So literally, I think Joelle may have, had the script started in August, and literally December, this was like in 2019, we hired Val on. So I think half the book was written by the time Val was brought on, and then Val started illustrating some pages. And then it was like 2 years from when Val was brought on till the book was done. I mean, the book was literally done, I think, the past June. About 2.5 years to get a book done.
Now, tell me, if you would, because I'm almost 100 years old. So, I grew up with Archie comics and Snoopy and Peanuts and the comics and the newspapers. But graphic novels is a new thing. I kind of was introduced to that when my son was in middle school and fell in love with the genre. What's the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel?
For me, a graphic novel is a type of comic book. So generally comics are floppies, which are like 20 to 32 pages around. And a graphic novel is just a larger comic book in like a paperback or hardcover form. So most of the times it's a complete story, and that's why it's called a graphic novel.
I guess you could look at it as comics are more like a TV series where you get installments that can go on for several months and have several different story arcs. It can be more open-ended, whereas a graphic novel is more of a film where it has a beginning and an end.
Yeah. Joelle, one of the things that I didn't realize when my son was in middle school, and I supported his love of graphic novels, and we'd go out and grab some, and anytime I was on the road, I'd go into a bookshop and pick up graphic novels or anime, manga. But I didn't appreciate the fact that reading comics and reading graphic novels is reading, and there's great stories there, and there's some great conversations that can come from families reading graphic novels together or co-reading them. What kind of conversations do you think families can have after they read and experience Werewolves together?
Well, I took great care to make sure that every character had some kind of issue they were dealing with. The core group of kids, we don't really have any filler characters. That one character is dealing with pressure from his parents to work and get good grades. We have another an LGBT story.
Yeah, a lot to get into as a family. Brandon, I'm curious, what's next for Werewolves? Is this going to be an ongoing series?
Hopefully the book gets sales and people are interested in it. We'd love to do a second volume immediately. We definitely have some ideas percolating, and if you read the story, you have an idea where it could go. So
exciting. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Werewolves and more about your publishing house.
Right. So first off, they can go to our website, newparadigmstudios.com, and there is a Werewolves page with a 10-page preview. And the book is right now on Amazon. It just got released the last week of December, so they can get a paperback there. And we actually had the digital version come out at the beginning of last month, so you can get both versions there right now. And some comic shops in LA are carrying the book as well.
Awesome.
And we're going to get some more shops across the country.
Wonderful. And Joelle, if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at WhereIsJoelle, Joelle.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author and publisher of Werewolves, a really fun comic from New Paradigm Studios. And our guests have been Brandon Perlow and Joelle Sellner. Hey, Joelle and Brandon, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be JJ Shegog. She'll be here to celebrate her Dealing With series, a great series that deals with social emotional issues. We would love it if you could subscribe to the Reading with Your Kids podcast and let the world know all about it. We debuted in 2017. Since that time, we have brought hundreds and hundreds of authors to for your attention. Some of them world famous authors and celebrities like LeVar Burton, Mark Brown, Karen Parsons, Brad Meltzer, Jerry Spinelli. So many independent authors and publishers, and we've been so honored to be a part of your life. Thank you so very much. If you've been a long-time listener, thank you so very much. If you are a new listener, welcome to the show. Please do subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you find your podcast. Some of our favorite podcasting apps are the iHeartRadio apps, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Good Pods, Podchaser, Ghana, Himalaya, Stitcher Radio. The list goes on and on and on. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, K.M. Waldvogel. Please be sure to check out Spies, Soldiers, Couriers, and Saboteurs, Women of the American Revolution. Also want to thank Brandon Perlow and Joelle Sellner. Please be sure to check out WereWoofs. I want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.